Gazing upon our world from a distance, it appears peaceful and calm. But the reality is far different. The repercussions of climate change are approaching us all, and we all contribute to this impact. By 2050, projections indicate that over 3 billion people will reside in various urban centers in the Asia-Pacific region alone. Urban activities are a key contributor to climate change. Cities are responsible for 75% of global CO2 emissions, with transport and buildings among the most significant contributors. And since 2012, the Asia-Pacific region has collectively been responsible for more than half of global greenhouse gas emissions yearly. The repercussions of climate change are imminent and befalling us all. Several Asian countries are among the top 10 countries most affected by climate change, with the Philippines ranked the 4th, India ranked the 7th, and Thailand ranked the 9th. It's time to act, and we have a joint responsibility to address climate change through urban development planning and design guided by climate data. That's where Urban Act comes in. Urban Act, or the Integrated Urban Climate Action for Low Carbon and Resilient Cities project, is a regional project that aims to support the transformation towards low carbon and resilient urban development and contribute to implementing each partner country's nationally determined contributions and the Sustainable Development Goals. Funded by the International Climate Initiative, or ICI, commissioned by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, or BMWK, Urban Act is implemented in 5 partner countries: China, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand, with a duration spanning 5 years from 2022 to 2027. We aim to achieve 4 critical outputs. These outputs include improving the institutional environment for climate-sensitive urban development, using evidence-based, inclusive, climate-sensitive, spatial and urban planning, identifying project concepts for urban climate action investment, and enhancing knowledge through regional networking, exchange, and learning. Our collaborative partnership comprises the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit GmbH, or GIZ, as a project leader, and the international partners consisting of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP, United Cities and Local Governments Asia Pacific, or UCLG ASPAC, the University of Stuttgart, and TU Dortmund University, and national partners in each of the project countries. To promote and showcase a sustainable integration of climate change into urban development, Urban Act implements its support in 14 pilot cities across the 5 countries, recognizing the unique context of the partner countries and aiming to improve the country's specific policies and regulatory frameworks. Furthermore, we engage in joint operations with the Indonesia-Malaysia-Thailand Growth Triangle, or IMTGT, implementing initiatives in 6 cities within the IMTGT sub-region. We are all standing on the edge, and every decision and action we take today will shape our future for generations to come. It is not just a choice, it's a collective responsibility that falls on each of our shoulders. It's time for us to unite and journey towards low-carbon, resilient urban development. Join us in the Urban Act, Joint Action for Climate-Friendly and Resilient Cities. We are stronger if we are together.
Hello and welcome everyone to today's session of our Climate Conscious Cities webinar series. I hope you can hear us all well, and for those of you who joined early the session, you might also already have seen the video giving more context on Urban Act just now. Today we will focus on the question how to turn the NDCs 3.0, so the new round of NDCs that are due this year, how we will transform those into local climate action. For this session, we invited three distinguished speakers for you. Let me briefly introduce them to you before you will hear more from them later. We first invited Juhi Bansal. She's an NDCs and LT-led specialist working for the Regional Collaboration Center for Asia and the Pacific of the UNFCCC. Furthermore, we have with us Professor Shubhakar Dakhal, who is a professor at the Department of Energy and Climate Change at the Asian Institute of Technology. And furthermore, we have Ms. Lee Titkun, Director at the Department of Heritage Conservation at the City Council of Penang Island. From those distinguished speakers, you will hear in a moment and their insights on how we can turn NDC 3.0 into local climate action. But before I will hand over to our experts, allow me to give you a little bit of background on the webinar series and also make you aware of some general housekeeping. So this Urban Act series is a monthly webinar series. It is organized by Urban Act. We are a regional project supporting climate-sensitive urban development in Asia, specifically in 5 countries here in the region. Urban Act is funded by the International Climate Initiative, or short the ICI, of the federal government of Germany. For those who have seen the video, you already know we are implemented by a broad consortium, including GIZ, ESCAP, UCLG ASFAC, and also 2 German universities of Stuttgart and Dortmund, as well as partners in each of the implementing countries. So this webinar series, for those of you who joined for the first time, the aim is to increase and share the knowledge on everything related to low carbon and climate resilient urban development, both with our project partners, but also for a broader audience. So if you find this interesting, this webinar series is open for everyone to join. Please spread the word. And we also use this webinar to look at innovations and emerging topics that are maybe beyond what we're currently doing with Urban Act, but what we see as emerging topics from our project context and beyond. So if you're interested, the next webinar session will be on December 3rd, where we will look at the outcomes of this year's COP, which is around the corner, and we will look at what this COP and the outcomes will mean for cities. And now just some general housekeeping. As you may be aware, we are recording this webinar. We will then later on share it with you also together with the slides, so don't hesitate. You can also get a certificate for this webinar series for having attended the session. If you want a certificate, just complete the feedback survey that we will send to you and make sure you will do so within 2 weeks. If you don't need a certificate, we are still very thankful if you can complete the feedback survey afterwards, as well as this will help us to make this webinar series even more meaningful to all of you. You can see the chat wherever it is on your browser or in your app. So feel free to use the chat for chatting with other participants or also us organizers if you have any comments or any problems. But if you have a question, we would like to ask you to use the Q&A box, which you will also find in your bar. We already got some questions from you prior to the webinar, but of course you also have the chance to ask something during the session. We will have a Q&A session in the end, so don't you worry if your questions have not been answered. If you go to the Q&A chat box, you will also be able to comment existing questions or upvote those that you find most interesting. So we will make sure we will prioritize these for you. And with having said that, I will not longer make you wait. Yeah, by the way, I am your moderator for today's session. I'm Marilena Hutfeld. I'm an advisor for the Urban Act project. and working with GIZ as one of the implementing partners. And now you've heard a lot on the context and the background, but let's now dive deep into the topic with our first distinguished guest, who's Juhi Bansal. Again, she's an NDCs and LT-led specialist. She works for the Regional Collaboration Center for Asia and the Pacific at the UNFCCC. Handing over to you, Juhi, and we will be super interested hearing from you.
Thank you, Marilena, and I hope you can hear me well. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's joined the webinar.
We cannot hear you yet, Juhi.
Can you not hear me?
Audio is working my end. I hope it is working for everybody else.
Thank you very much. So through this brief presentation, I aim to take everyone through 4 key aspects. If we can move the next slide, please.
Is it just me? I think we can still not hear you.
I'm not sure. Okay, I think everyone else can hear me.
Yes,
maybe
I believe we can all hear you, Juhi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll go on with that. So through these 4 key aspects, the first one will be the overview of the NDC process under the Paris Agreement. The second will be the overview of the global stocktake outcome. The third, which for me is the most fascinating, is the key findings of the 2025 NDC synthesis report, which was released yesterday. And lastly, looking at the localization of climate action under the UNFCCC processes. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So starting with the Paris Agreement, you know, it's small words for a very big kind of framework. The ambition cycle is the bedrock of the Paris Agreement, which you can also see on your screens. It has been designed and agreed to by parties to contribute towards achieving the collective long-term temperature goals of the Paris Agreement over time. So this is a 5-year cycle, which has certain recurring elements, the first of which is the nationally determined contributions, or the NDCs, which I will go into more detail in a bit. We also have the biennial transparency reports, or the BTRs, and the global stocktakes, or the GST. The ambition cycle begins with the NDCs. So these are your national climate pledges or national climate action plans that countries submit to the UNFCCC. These outline how far and how countries will contribute to the Paris Agreement's long-term goals of limiting global warming to either 1.5 degrees Celsius or well below 2 degrees Celsius. And through their NDCs, countries outline their commitments to reduce emissions, adapt to climate impacts, and build resilience as well. They provide information as well on the means of implementation that are needed to achieve the country's commitments in this process. And countries are required to update their NDCs every 5 years, with each NDC being more ambitious than the previous one. So the next round of NDCs with 2035 outcomes, also called the NDC 3.0, became due this year. At this point in time, the Enhanced Transparency Framework comes in, also called the ETF. And under the ETF, countries regularly report on progress that they have made on their NDC commitments through their biennial transparency reports, or BTRs. And in this way, the BTRs and NDCs are almost an interlinked process. The targets that are there in the NDCs are to be reported on in the BTRs. And it doesn't stop here, because every 5 years, we come together to collectively evaluate progress through the global stocktake to assess whether we're on track to meet the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement or whether we need to course correct. And the outcomes of the GST in turn are intended to inform the next round of NDCs, thereby allowing that course correction. And every 5 years, the cycle starts afresh. So together, these elements, the NDCs, the ETF, and the global stocktake, they create a dynamic cycle of ambition. And this ambition cycle ensures that the Paris Agreement is a living, breathing framework that drives continuous improvement and global cooperation. This is a very interesting time because 2025 is the first completion of the cycle. And this is now the first time that we're seeing the process operating with all the elements in action, because the first GST concluded in 2023 at COP28. The first BTRs were due in December 2024, and the new NDCs were submitted in 2025 and are still being submitted as we speak. Next slide, please. So just going towards the global stocktake, in 2023 at COP28, the global stocktake decision was agreed, and it is 21 pages and 196 paragraphs long, and it sets out just how far we've come, where we need to go, and what needs to be done to get us there. Now, one slide truly cannot do it justice in its entirety, but I will try to give you a flavor of the overall outcome. However, it is key and critical to see the global stocktake as a whole package and that the GST outcome as seen in its entirety. So on mitigation, it's emphasized that we need to have collective action to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach, which requires urgent, deep GHG emission reductions, encouragement for economy-wide NDCs, transitioning away from fossil fuels, tripling renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency by 2030, preserving and restoring oceans and coastal ecosystems, as well as transitioning to sustainable consumption and production. In terms of adaptation, there's a focus on incremental, multi-sectoral, and transformational actions, looking at universal early warning systems, adaptation targets to reach the global goal on adaptation, enhancing national adaptation plans, and adaptation communications. In terms of means of implementation, the decision focused on scaling up mobilization, looking at the $100 billion commitment, doubling adaptation finance, and supporting the new collective quantified goal on finance, or the NCQG, the technology implementation program, and enhanced capacity building support. There was also a focus placed on averting loss and damage, data management, as well as advancement of just transition and consideration of response measures. And importantly, the global stocktake outcome also emphasized international cooperation. The GST outcome also includes cross-cutting considerations by highlighting the urgency for immediate action in light of the best available science, considering equity, poverty eradication, and sustainable development. Next slide, please. So the GST outcome notes that despite progress that's been made, the GHG emissions are not yet in line with the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement, and unfortunately, our time is running short. The current NDC commitments, if fully implemented by 2030, they still put us in that red area that you see toward the top of that curve, whereas the trajectory that we need to be on are in the lower green area. So the new NDCs will be critical to bending this curve, and we already are hearing a lot about the fact that we are already overshooting our targets. But the new NDCs will be the critical element of the Paris Agreement to change course and to address or implement the outcome of the NDC, of the GST. Next slide, please. So now more on what's happening today. The 2025 NDC synthesis report by the UNFCCC Secretariat, it analyzes the new NDCs of 64 parties that have submitted thus far. Of course, parties are still submitting this, and it's not possible to draw wide-ranging global conclusions or inferences from this limited data set. But the report does highlight key lessons about progress that's being made and major challenges that lie ahead emerging from the NDCs that have been synthesized. So looking at now today in 2025, 10 years on from the adoption of the Paris Agreement, parties are bending their combined emission curve further downward, but it's still simply not quickly enough. There is a strong possibility of emissions peaking before 2030, but this is very much contingent upon the implementation of conditional elements of the NDC, which depend upon access to enhanced means of implementation like finance, technology, and capacity building support. Whole of economy and whole of society approaches are evident in the new NDCs, and they point to a strong climate action as an increasing core pillar of ensuring economic stability and growth, looking at jobs, health, and energy security and affordability, amongst other policy imperatives. But it does remain clear that a massive acceleration is still required in terms of delivering faster and deeper emission reduction and ensuring that the benefits of strong climate action reach all countries, all regions, and all peoples. The new NDCs reflect a deepening and more structured engagement of non-party stakeholders in climate action. An increasing number of parties are involving subnational entities, the private sector, and civil society in both the design and implementation of NDCs. And this is key since we're talking here about the urban aspect of the NDCs. Notably, 95% of the parties reported engaging non-party stakeholders in NDC implementation, which is 20% more than in the previous NDCs. And subnational entities are increasingly involved as partners in planning, implementing, and monitoring climate action, which is helping embed national goals into local plans for coherent implementation. Next slide, please. So this is just some salient points on, again, key findings in the new synthesis report. We're seeing that new NDCs show a progression in terms of quality, credibility, and economic coverage, with 89% of the parties communicating economy-wide targets, which is compared to the 81% in the previous NDCs. The new NDCs include responses to the outcomes of the first global stocktake, with 88% of the parties indicating that their NDCs were informed by the outcomes of the GST, and 80% specifying how. The emission trajectories that are set out in the new NDCs are broadly consistent with a linear trajectory from the parties' 2030 targets to their long-term net zero targets, which is showing that parties are laying out clear stepping stones toward net zero, although it still requires further acceleration of action on the ground. Collectively, the new NDCs show a reduction in projected emissions of 17% below the 2019 level. Nearly all parties, which is almost 98%, have communicated domestic mitigation measures in the new NDCs, with 80% reporting measures for at least one of the 6 low-cost mitigation options, with the highest mitigation potential for up to 2035. Of course, amongst these, the most popular are afforestation and reforestation, solar energy, and reducing deforestation. And these are the options that also require greater need for support. All NDCs go beyond mitigation to include elements which include adaptation, finance, technology transfer, capacity building, and addressing loss and damage, which reflects the comprehensive scope of the Paris Agreement. Importantly, also, adaptation and resilience are featuring more prominently in the NDCs, with 73% of the new NDCs including an adaptation component. An increasing trend in the NDCs mentioning is also NDCs mentioning co-benefits resulting from adaptation action and or economic diversification plans. A total of 70% of the parties have considered just transitions in preparing their new NDCs, and the majority of these parties plan to integrate considerations of just transitions in NDC implementation. There's also an increase in parties indicating their intention to participate in voluntary cooperation under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement to contribute towards reaching the NDC goals. And 89% of the parties have indicated that they plan to or that they may use at least one of the scopes of voluntary cooperation under Article 6 in comparison with 64% in the previous NDCs. Now, implementation of the new NDCs necessitates strong ongoing international cooperation and new and innovative approaches to unlock finance and support for developing country parties at scale to ensure that these are not just words on paper. And just for the purpose of this webinar, I also had a quick look at the urban aspect that has been considered in the new NDCs. And it is very heartening to see that this focus is being prominently mentioned within mitigation and adaptation targets, but also specifically within legal and policy frameworks for NDC implementation. 28% of the NDCs have highlighted legislation, strategies, and policies related to transport, including decarbonization. 13% of parties mentioned legal and policy frameworks related to urban and spatial planning. 13% of parties have referred to circular economy instruments, and 25% of parties reported legislations, policies, and strategies related to buildings, construction, and infrastructure. Next slide, please. So when we look at localizing climate action under the UNFCCC processes, the first question we must ask is, why do we need to localize? The first, and most importantly, it is important to look at the delivery of the high-level NDC targets, and the delivery of that lives in cities. This is focusing on buildings, transport, waste, cooling, land use, and small industry, which are all primarily urban policy domains. And these drive a large share of mitigation and adaptation outcomes. Secondly, focusing on speed and scale. So looking at municipal levers such as codes, permits, procurements, and operations, which can turn national intent into near-term results. And thirdly, looking at equity and resilience. Urban action determines access to services like cooling, transport, water and housing, and climate risk reduction, which is key for people's safety and health. When we look at how to localize, the first, of course, is NDCs, which provide near or midterm goals. And if NDCs include a dedicated urban and subnational chapter, which spells out city-level targets, policies, finance, and MRV that all break down the national level goals, it is very useful. Secondly, LT-LEDs, or the long-term low-emission development strategies, provide long-term targets, and aligning the 2050 urban pathways, which include buildings, mobility, materials or waste, nature-based resilience and cooling, with national net zero trajectories and 5-year investment pipelines can be very useful to give investors confidence and also align national action. Thirdly, the global stocktake. Using GST findings to mandate multi-level dialogues and update NDCs with city measures, and tracking subnational progress as part of the national learning can really help localize action. Then we have to look at enhanced transparency frameworks, as I mentioned, the BTRs and the ETF. If we integrate city MRV, including activity and outcome data into national reporting, and define standards and field templates at that level, it can really help integrate city-level action into the national level targets. Under the UNFCCC processes, we also have the Action for Climate Empowerment, or ACE, which helps access funding for city-level capacity, participation, and awareness-building programs, which underpin implementation. We also have the Marrakesh Partnership, or the High-Level Champions, which help plug priority cities into sectoral pathways, which are key to deliver the high-level NDC targets. And this can help accelerate replication, pooled procurement, and standard development. Lastly, I would like to mention regional collaboration, for example, looking at convening national city implementation compacts, or things like sister cities or city twinning to share learnings and broker technical assistance. Now, I'd like to leave you with the last few messages from my side that there is no one-size-fits-all. It is up to parties and countries to prepare NDCs and associated policies which truly reflect national circumstances and priorities. In the new NDCs, countries should look into how ambition can really be unlocked, how they can actually be a progression from the previous NDC and contribute to global climate goals, while also addressing their national development priorities. NDCs do not stand alone. They're closely linked to other elements of the ambition cycle, which is the GHG inventories, the BTRs, the GST, domestic policies and measures, as well as the LT-LEDs, which countries are already preparing, and these should all feed into and inform the NDC processes. And lastly, as I mentioned before, ambition without implementation is only words on paper, and this is where sectoral roadmaps and subnational action are critical in delivering the implementation of the high-level national targets. So I would like to stop here and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Juhi. And please excuse me for the glitch in my audio that was definitely on my side. Yeah, thank you so much, Juhi, for giving us some background on the NDC process, but also on the progress and sharing some insights of the latest NDC synthesis report. And again, making us all aware that, of course, it needs the local level for the implementation of our international and national climate goals. Next up, we will hear from Professor Shubhakar Dakhal, who is a professor at the Department of Energy and Climate Change at the Asian Institute of Technology. From him, we will hear some recommendations on how to strengthen the integration of NDCs and urban. And with that, handing over to you, Shubhakar.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me well. Greetings from the outskirts of Kathmandu with a beautiful day. I see the entire mountain range with the snow peaks, but I'm also hoping that the internet quality would be stable. If not, please let me know. I'll try to find the alternatives, but I hope that internet would be stable. First of all, thank you to organizers, Urban Act program, for your such a kind invitation. In the interest of time, please allow me to get into the topic that I'd like to share with you. What I'd like to share with you today is based on something that we are developing with the UN ESCAP on a small piece of work to draw few recommendations based on looking at the urban content in NDC in Asia Pacific, some kind of evidences from urban implementation of NDCs, and what is its implication for the future climate action and NDC implementation. I hope that I'll do justice with you in next few 7 minutes time. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think we all know about the challenges. I think Juhi's talk was already set a very excellent stage. And I think that Juhi already mentioned that the challenge of climate change mitigation is quite a big challenge. The new NDCs are very critical. In last slide that Juhi presented, that how to bend from that red NDC, current NDCs, pathways to down to the blue line where Paris Agreement compatible pathways to be achieved. So in that context, I think the urban area are very key hotspot. The video which was shown just before a session started was quite clear. If you look at the existing studies carried out in different forums, including the one from UN Habitat and others, say that there is still a lot to do in terms of urban representation in NDCs. Studies have shown that 34% or that range of the NDC still has a negligible or no urban content, whereas the urban content in NDC varies quite differently across the countries. Even in NDC 3.0, which we are expecting countries to submit very soon, still there are some improvements in those NDCs which has been sent, till last month or two. But still, the improvement is quite a marginal in some of those first few NDC 3.0. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that the urban content in NDCs are there, but yet weaker, and how to localize NDC is something very important for us, given the role and importance of urban area into this whole game. Next slide, please. If you look at I think Juhi also mentioned that so far 64 countries have submitted NDC 3.0, including several from Asia Pacific. We try to even look at how things has improved. Yes, in some cases it has improved the urban content, and in some cases it has not improved. So we have still a lot to do in that respect. Next slide, please. So I think, a challenge, in terms of challenge, one key issue in NDC is that many of these NDCs remain very sectoral oriented. Being sectoral oriented is not bad, nothing wrong with that. But in that process, the urban has been diffused, and the NDC content where the urban can play a significant role, sometimes that are in the shadow. So how to bring NDC from overly sectoral perspective to urban bit of a integrative perspective, that remains to be a problem. How to frame urban in a bit of cross-sectoral fashion to really bring a synergy across different sectors, and looking space as a place where everything comes together, urban as a space, that still remains a problem. But despite that sectoral focus, there are a growing number of NDCs that have positioned urban areas at the core of their mitigation and adaptation priorities. And I'll not take name of the countries, but several countries have done quite well, while others have not done that well. So still the actionable pathways and the enabling means for the urban implementation of NDCs are a bit weaker, and in many cases unclear. So there is more to do from the perspective of bringing urban content into the NDC, but also implementing NDC in a way that works very well in the urban context, top down versus bottom of synergy. That remains to be done, but progress has been made. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do in next few minutes that I have is to, in that context, share few emerging recommendations for strengthening urban NDC integration. This is a piece of work which is evolving. We really look forward to your suggestions and feedbacks, so that it will also act as a feedback to us in fine-tuning these recommendations and developing new ones in the next few months time frame. Next slide, please. So from this ongoing study, we find that one very important aspect is some kind of very clearly mandating subnational involvement in NDC governance and development. Countries have done that in many different ways, but not very clearly and not very systematic fashion. So making the involvement of local and subnational governments mandatory during the NDC development process is very important, which can ensure that these urban realities and capacities are duly reflected in these national commitments such as NDCs, but also to long-term LED and the NAPS process. So also there is need to create a formal space where such kind of multi-level partnership and collaborations can happen during the entire cycle of NDC, right from formulation to the implementation and monitoring. So creating this platform and the mandating subnational involvement is something very, very important. Next slide, please. And the second point, what we have come up with is systematically integrating urban content into national climate framework is very important. So integrating urban data, urban actions into these core documents is very important, and it requires evidence-based. So this evidence-based urban-focused NDC targets need to be integrated in the NDCs. And also, we need to move beyond the sectoral framing to develop very dedicated urban strategies. And also inside the sectoral strategies, weaving urban is an integrating element. We have to act from the top down versus bottom up way to integrating urban content, and the relative capacities are very important. Next slide, please. Then there is need to bridge the policy and action gaps, because the urban mitigation challenge and adaptation need to be complemented with the corresponding policies, measures, and financing mechanisms. So this harmonization is very important if we want to localize NDCs duly, and developing detailed urban specific implementation plan for NDCs, commitments and their roles, responsibilities of the urban, that kind of framing we still need to do that can help localize NDC and to make NDC doable in a sense. Next slide, please. Now, financing has been a very, very important element. Of course, UNFCCC always talks about the means of implementation. As you know, capacity building, financing, and technology transfer. The financing is very important. How to increase the direct funding and fiscal autonomy for cities is very important. How to enhance the capacity of cities to access international climate financing is very important. There are lots of new innovative financing mechanism has been developed, how city can harness on that, how urban implementation can harness that, and also how city level climate budgets and other things can be enhanced. This financing issue is something very, very important for us to bring it forward. Without that, moving forward is often very, very difficult. Next slide, please. And capacity building, I think regional technical cooperation. I think Juhi also before me mentioned about the importance of the regional cooperation. Investing in such sustained capacity building program is very important, especially for the local governments, the municipal governments, because technical skills, the data planning has been quite difficult at that scale. So how to strengthen the regional technical cooperation to bring them together in some kind of peer learning platform. There are several, including the Urban Act project, how to strengthen that, how to work in unison. Those regional cooperation has to be a fundamental base, and from there we can grow a number of other things. Next slide, please. So given interest of time, let me share with you the last kind of recommendations that we are working on. In totality, how to leverage city as a hub for synergistic climate action is something very important for localizing NDC and implementing NDC 3.0. So developing the collaborations across different levels, especially with the city governments horizontally and vertically, is very, very important. And also creating synergy between mitigation and adaptation, but also vetting mitigation and adaptation together with the SDG goals at urban level, with linking many other elements is very important. So our success to achieve NDC 3.0 depends on how we successfully deal with the urban issue and how we localize NDC implementation into the urban context. That quite a lot depends and quite a lot defines our success. Thank you for that. In the interest of time, let me stop here. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shubhaka. Very interesting. I think you raised a lot of important points, noting that the sectoral nature of a lot of NDCs should, of course, not overlook the complex nature of urban systems, and also raising the awareness of the opportunity of translating the NDCs, even if they don't have that much urban content, but then we still need to translate them into concrete urban action plans, which then can be an opportunity, but only if it is tied to the relevant finance. And of course, we take this as a, let's say, mandate to continue with the work we are doing at Urban Ag and like strengthening the capacities and providing technical assistance. Thank you so much for those insights. Q&A we will have later. Again, as a reminder for everyone, You can post your questions in the Q&A box, and then we will make sure in the end to respond them. Now let us continue with the presentation of Mrs. Lee Tit Kun. She's director at the Department of Heritage Conservation at the City Council of Penang Island, and she will provide us some insights on how Penang is advancing its climate and development goals through nature and heritage-driven solutions. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Miss Lee, or maybe we can meet Kun from City Councils of Penang Islands, Malaysia. And it's my pleasure today to share with you how Penang is looking at global climate commitments, translating the Malaysia's NDC 3.0 and the 2030 Penang agendas into a real actions through nature-based and heritage-driven solutions. Next slide, please. Okay, to begin, Penang Islands is just located on the northwest coast of Malaysia and is along the Straits of Malacca. Next. The islands cover approximately about 303 square meters and has a population around 792,000 residents. Despite our dense urban settings, more than 61% of the Penang Islands still remains as a green and nature areas, protected by planning regulations that restricts developments on hill slopes, forest reserve, and also water catchments. This is to balance between the urban growth and also the ecological protections forms the foundations of our local climate resilience strategies. Next. In line with the Malaysia's low carbon mobility blueprint 2021 until 2030, Penang is integrating the low carbon transport solutions as part of our climate actions. At the local level, City Councils of Penang Islands work with the Penang Transport Master Plan to expand the pedestrians and cycling networks, pilots in EV charging stations, and also support the transit-oriented developments, the TOD. Okay, next. Besides, we also aligned with the Malaysia's National Energy Transitions Roadmap from 2023 until 2050, which chart the nation's pathway towards a net zero emissions. At the city levels, actually, City Councils of Penang Islands contribute through energy efficiency buildings designs, for example, LED street lightings, rooftop solar panels projects under the low carbon cities frameworks. Ensures Penang's local developments directly support the Malaysian national decarbonization agenda. Okay, next. Like many coastal cities in Southeast Asia, Penang also face a lot of problems like increasing risk of sea levels rise, flooding, rising of temperatures, and also rainfall. So from our climate risk assessments projects temperature increase of up to 1.34 degrees Celsius and projected rainfalls exceeding 500 millimeters by 2050 based on our Penang Islands Green City Action Plan studies. Next. So in our overall policies and frameworks, actually Penang 2030 is a family-focused green and smart states that inspired the nations is being enforced in 29 August 2018, which align with the SDGs and also Malaysia's NDC 3.0. It links the economic growth and the social well-being and environment responsibilities, encourage data-driven and also inclusive urban designs and policies. Okay, next. To operate the Penang 2030, the Penang Green Agendas 2.0 identifies the 10 important working areas, land use of plannings until the disaster risk management to the green mobilities and water. So these agendas provides a comprehensive platform from the local climate actions, engaging multiples of stakeholders, and also guide both states and city councils on the plannings. Next. In the Penang 2030s agendas, there is a themes where we focus on the invest in the built environment to improve resilience, where we focus in D4, which is implements climate change adaptations plan. So Penang intends to lead the nations by developing the Malaysia First Climate Adaptations Plan, which is to cooling the urban areas through greening and flood risk mitigations. This project is called Penang Nature-Based Climate Adaptations Program. Next. So to deliver concrete results under the Malaysia's NDC 3.0's MPPP, which is called City Councils of Penang Islands, launched this project, Penang Nature-Based Climate Adaptations Program, which short form is PNB-CAPS. So it is a Cities Councils Penang Islands flagship initiatives for localizing Malaysia's climate commitment. So it focused on the cooling urban areas and mitigations flood risk through tree-lined streets, pocket parks, green parking space, urban agriculture programs, and also the blue-green corridor concepts. So the total investments is about USD 10 million, where it is funded from World Bank Adaptations Fund, and City Councils of Penang Islands receive USD 3.5 to 5 million on this project. So PNB-CAPS is to demonstrate how the city's governments can translate the national's climate targets into a locally owned and national nature-based solutions to create co-benefits between the cooler streets, healthier neighborhoods, and also the stronger ecosystems. Next. As you all know, heritage is also central to the Penang sustainability stories, where Georgetown is being inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 7 July 2008. And Georgetown is being chosen, the Georgetown UNESCO World Heritage Site is being chosen to become a pilot project for the PNB-CAPS, is to contribute and examples to the world's house heritage and conservations can contribute in the low carbon cities developments. So adaptive reuse of heritage buildings, reduce the material waste, support the local livelihoods, and also maintain the city identities is to how the city councils of Penang Island making the cultural continuities to form a climate resilience. Next. Next, please. So this is a new urban practice. Oh, can it be back? Okay, our approach is to combine the environment aspects, the human and social aspects, and also don't forget about the heritage culture aspects together to make the city sustainable, resilient, and culturally vibrant in the Georgetown World Heritage Site. Okay, next. So in the PNB-CAP projects, of course, the nature-based solutions are the very important elements on actions protect, sustainably management, and restore the natural and modify the ecosystem that address societal challenge effectively and adaptively while providing the human well-being and also biodiversity's benefit to the cities and to the urbans. Next. So this is a project under the PMB caps, which we transform the back lanes, the side lanes to a urban park. Next. This project is to transform a neglected back lanes and into a urban project, a public space using nature-based concepts. And previously, the site is a vacant plot of land, limited visibility and accessibilities, and is underutilized and poor maintained, and also lack of basics infrastructures. And just for your information, this land is a development land, but citizens of Penang Islands convert it to an urban park to contribute back to the locals. Next. So, next. So this is the conditions after the completions. Next. 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 Okay, so from these thermal imagings, you can see prove that there is evidence on climate responsive designs. This project is transformed from a neglected space until a vibrant open space, public space for the public. And before the inventions, actually the surface temperatures is reached until 50 degrees Celsius. And after the greenings and adding the permeable surface, the temperature totally drops until 26 degrees. So there is a huge reduction of 24 degrees Celsius. It is a small scale, but is a powerful demonstration on how urban designs can contribute to adaptations, comfort, and community to the community life. Next. Coming up, our city councils is to have, coming out is the Penang Islands Climate Actions Plan 2030, which is focused on localizations, data partnerships to ensure the resilience is embedded into every service. For example, transport, waste, water, heritage management. The key message of this action plan is to localizations matter, because city councils of Penang Islands believe that local actions turn national ambitions into implementations. And next, and based on the SDGs 13, the city councils of Penang Islands believe that climate actions is everyone's responsibilities. Next. Last but not least, together, we can make Penangs and cities everywhere both sustainable and culturally resilient. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights from Penang. Very much appreciated, Ms. Lititkun. As we don't have much time left, let's jump right into the Q&A session. And I will try to at least give like one question per speaker per topic. So maybe let's start with the first one for the UN maybe. To question like how can UN regional bodies help countries strengthen urban integration in future NDC updates? It's a question by Puneet Sharma. And maybe Juhi, if you want to say something on that.
Thank you very much for this. I mean, I think in UN regional bodies, I think we have, of course, organizations like ESCAP that are taking more of the regional role, and the regional collaboration centers here that are trying to look at the global mandates and the conversations that are happening at the global level around climate pledges, which of course still remain very siloed. We look at mitigation very separately from adaptation. I think my colleagues were also mentioning that the focus still remains on very sectoral conversations. So what we're trying to do at the regional level is ensure that this is more focused towards the countries in the regional level, and break it down to sub-regional, national, and then subnational level. And of course, there are a lot of organizations that are already trying to have more focused conversations on financing, also as was mentioned, to ensure that the commitments that are made translate to action on the ground. So there are dedicated capacity building exercises, there are dedicated roundtables, matchmaking that is happening to ensure that the conversation moves from beyond the global and the regional and the national level down and make sure it goes down to the subnational level. And meanwhile, just from the UNFCCC RCC perspective, not only are we trying to make sure that this conversation is top down, but similarly bottom up. So things that we're hearing from the subnational actors, from the local actors, from communities, from our youth and indigenous participants, we try to ensure that those are reflected as well in the negotiations, that those conversations are also heard at the regional and the global levels. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. I can also see, and like maybe making everyone aware, there are also some questions in the Q&A box that will be answered in written to make sure that you get the answers you deserve. So then maybe let's continue with a question by Norma Lagatagaza, which is a question to Dr. Lee. She said that one contributing factor in increase in urban population is the influx of climate migrants from rural areas, which are greatly affected by climate change. Are there actions or programs that respond to the social and health impacts of climate change migrants in urban areas? So far, I heard about structural responses like the last presentation. Ms. Lee, if you have any thoughts on that or insights. Then you can share. Or any insights, comments by any of the other speakers. Okay, if not, we will make sure to give you maybe an answer in written, as there may be some connection issues. Another question that we got was, what approaches are being prioritized for changing the mindset of stakeholders to achieve the climate goals? And it's probably a very vague and broad question, but maybe you have any recommendations for prioritization. I look at you, Shubhaka, maybe have some thoughts on that.
Yes, I think it's a pretty broad question, so I'll be brave to address perhaps. Changing mindset is very, very difficult, but even the challenge that we have, such a big challenge, mindset change is very, very important. And I can only say that at this point, but the prioritization, I see from the perspective of urban, we have not been able to put enough priority on urban as it deserves, especially for the fact that we also said few times that there are lots of sectoral approach. When the countries put NDC, when they put the plans and policies, they tend to go to sectors. Sectors are necessary but not sufficient, and without having bit more integrated, addressing the big elements, big ticket items is very difficult to capture, and that's where the role of addressing urban issues is very important. So, for example, it's not only about looking at the building, it's not only looking at our transport, but making sure that urban as a special elements is very optimum, where building, transport, and many other urban system can function together, and they can inherently create a low carbon society. So that kind of integrated approach, we need to put a more priority. And putting up sector and technology is relatively easy, and policymakers often find it's very easy to work on sectors and the technological interventions, but integrated aspects are little difficult. It's a long-term solution sometimes. So this is where I think more priority, in my view, is needed.
Thank you so much, Shubhaka. Maybe I can stick with you for a moment and ask you, or like one of the participants asked, how does AIT concretely collaborate with cities to design practical and technology-based solutions to reduce emissions and build resilience?
Right. So we are academic and research institution, right? We are not the implementation institution. So what we do in our institution is that first, we focus a lot in building the next generation leaders in urban area who can take on this big challenge of mitigating climate change and adapting. So human resource development is one big things that we do. And of course, then the knowledge creation, analyzing best practices, translating knowledge into the practice, engagement with the stakeholders of all level, and translating that into the real practical domain. So we operate in that domain. So on that, we collaborate with number of institutions, international institutions, universities, civil society, governments, private sector, also different UN agencies, to make sure that that happens. So we operate in the interface between human resource development, knowledge creation, and translating knowledge into the practice. So that domain, we do a lot of things.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And as I see Ms. Lititkun back again, I have a question for Penang City. How is Penang prioritizing climate adaptation for vulnerable groups, including children, and in your local budget and in the policies? Maybe you can give us some insights on that.
Yeah, just for your information, local councils actually yearly is budgeted for, plus we budgeted yearly is about ringgit Malaysia 5 billions for this group of persons to upgrade, to do projects, to do programs with them. And next year's we are budgeted about ringgit Malaysia 15 millions to do up a projects where, for example, for the autism people, for the vulnerable, for the blind, for the cancers people. So we are trying to move to these sectors so that we as a city councils, local councils can help the vulnerable groups and also the childs. And besides, we are also championing on the age-friendly cities under the WHO and also the UNICEF. So city councils is in the pipeline to help from the top until the bottoms, from the rich until the poor.
Thank you so much. And we got another question for Yuhi from Vidita Larasati. The question is, what practical mechanisms have proven effective in integrating gender-responsive mandates, dedicated budget lines, and accountability measures into local or subnational climate actions, meaning moving beyond rhetorical inclusions, particularly within developing country contexts? Maybe you have some insights from your work at the UNFCCC on what has proven effective.
Thanks, Marilyn, and thanks for that question. Unfortunately, my work doesn't actually take me to the subnational level. At the NDC level, there is a lot happening to connect that conversation that's happening on the ground and making sure we get the data that is reflective of what's happening on the ground. So I think we have seen, at least from UNICEF and UN Women, a lot of indicators and targets looking at the data being reported to inform the policies that are being made at the national level. So there's a lot of gender-based, evidence-based policy making that is going into ensuring that gender and youth are included adequately in the NDCs. But beyond that, I think when it comes to finances, I think this is where the important question comes in on budget tagging. And that would ensure, because I also saw another question on, double counting and reporting. A big part of what's happening is the conversation is still stuck in different silos, and different ministries are doing a lot of work on climate, implementation. Similarly, as it's happening vertically downwards, a lot of work is happening at the subnational level in cities and in local councils but that doesn't reflect adequately at the level of the NDC development and implementation. And therefore, budget tagging is really important in tracking where finances are going in so that the funding that is coming in and is being spent on climate issues can actually be fully integrated into the national reporting processes. I also actually just wanted to address this one question, which I found very interesting on the first, I think it was from Marvin, that says, almost 64% of the countries have not submitted NDCs and, what challenges have been encountered. And I think the biggest issue that I would like to mention here is that, unfortunately, NDCs, BTRs, all of these are still seen in some countries as ad hoc processes. Countries are not approaching this as a cyclical process that will happen every 2 years for BTRs and every 5 years for NDCs. So unfortunately, what has happened this year is that the BTRs were due last year. A lot of countries were busy with preparing those. And once they got ready with the GHG inventories, then countries moved on to preparing their NDCs. The funding came in late, and a lot of these requests therefore got delayed, and therefore countries are now submitting later in the year. But I feel like if countries are to systemically embed these processes into their programmatic approaches, rather than looking at them as ad hoc processes that now need onboarding of new recruits, new consultants, new people need to be onboarded, new funding needs to come in, it becomes very challenging to ensure that the timelines are adhered to.
Yes, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Julie. Miss, just one comment for housekeeping. I know we're already like at 1 hour. We may continue for like another 10 minutes also to make sure we can answer some more questions. But to all of you who cannot stay with us, you already know that we are recording this session, and we will make sure you will get the session, the recording later on together with the slides. And you can also always have a look in the Q&A box for the questions that are answered in written. But yes, over to you, Ms. Lee.
Yeah, I just want to highlight and again on the gender responsive. Just for your information, City Councils of Penang Island actually started the gender responsive participatory budgeting since 2012. So yearly, when we start to do the next year budgets, we will be focused on called GRPB. We have a session town hall with all the local people and asking what is their hopes in the next year budgets, and we try to talk to them, work together with them so that the cities is still belongs to them, is the ownership of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe also to you again, and we had one question, I think you weren't able to get it earlier on a contributing factor in the increase in urban population being the influx of climate migrants. Even though that's probably sometimes hard to distinguish, but like climate migrants from rural areas that are greatly affected by climate change. And if you have any actions or programs that respond to these impacts on climate migrants in urban areas. Is that something you're already considering?
Rural migrants, just for your information, I think the whole Penang Islands is urban area. So there is not really a rural area in the whole Penang Island. So in a city council's budgeting, actually we just focus whole island from, we call it northwest or southwest, southeast. For the both whole islands, the budget is balanced so that it's covered for everybody during the GRPD. We do the budgets, we will go around and ask all the areas so that, and also the ministers, the local representative, the NGOs, so that the budget is covered, because we think that no one is left behind, is still the best for the city councils budgeting.
Okay. Thank you so much. I would say maybe we can leave it at this for now. I know there's some more questions. We will make sure to answer them in written or see that you can get a reply. Again, mentioning that there's already some, or a lot actually, of questions answered in written in the Q&A chat box. So sorry, I think you should be able to see me now again. Sorry, guys, I'm facing some technical issues on my side, obviously. But thanks again for all of our distinguished speakers and for bearing with me with all the technicality issues. We hope you liked this webinar. If so, or if not, please make sure to fill in the feedback survey. This will also grant you a certificate of participation if you're looking forward to that. And as you may all know, the next COP is around the corner in Brazil. And in December, we will look into what this COP means for cities and for climate action. Again, thank you everyone so much for being with us today, and hope you enjoyed this session. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.